watching this Etowah. As always, we're going to hang out for just a few seconds and let some of you jump in. But if you're watching this down the road, go ahead and you can fast forward, or you can listen to us jibber jabber for a few minutes. But basically this evening, what we're going to do is discuss the medical waste facility. Had an open meeting about that was live streamed a couple of weeks ago, but some development for Rainbow City, and we've got the mayor sitting here, and then we've got the team from MWT that are here to discuss with us as well and answer your questions. So if that's something that you've heard rumors about or you want the ground truth on, then tonight is the night, and we'll get into whatever questions you guys have. So stick around and let me know what questions you've got. So I'm seeing a few folks jump in. If somebody could let me know in the comments that you can hear us, that you've got that we've got a good feed, that would be most helpful. Like a thumbs up, or let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to feel like I'm just sitting here talking into the bottomless abyss of the internet. So I guess while we wait for some folks to jump on, Mayor, how are you today? Been a good day?
It's been a great day.
All right.
Got a chance to go to another city and speak with a Parks and Recreation director about some of the future plans that we have for Rainbow City, and got to see a very progressive recreation department that's doing really good things north of here, and we want to try to make sure we don't try to reinvent the wheel and just do some things that have already been proven, and they're really doing it well.
All right.
It's the city of Athens. I don't mind saying it. They are a really, really thriving city.
Yeah.
They're growing just at leaps and bounds, and they've got some guys up there that are running their guys and ladies, but they're running their Parks and Recreation department like a machine, and it's putting out a premium service, which is what we want to do in Rainbow City.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, as you're jumping on, hit that share button, tag a friend. I know it's Thursday night at 6. I'm guessing there's probably a soccer practice or a baseball practice. But we'll get rolling here in just a minute, but you can see we've got a room full, and then we've got a couple of folks dialing in from around the world. So we'll get to introducing everybody here in just a second. This has been it seems like some have tried to make this a bigger deal than it is. But it's definitely been interesting for this medical waste facility to kind of be the next thing. We'll get into how the mayor feels about that versus my opinions, but it's all right. It's a good thing, and it's being handled well. So, guys, if you've got questions at all about this, then by all means, throw them in the comments, and we'll try to get through. Just a quick little admin from Advanced Etowah. We have got invitations out. The questions are out for all the candidates to get answers, and as we get those in, I think we're looking at by the end of the month we'll start making all their answers public. Also, just started reaching out to line up for individual interviews, and been talking. Started with discussions with Rainbow City. Has been gracious enough to look at hosting some debates, or I say roundtables, I think is a better way to to phrase what we're going to try to do. But roundtable discussion, they got a great facility over there at City Hall. So more information on that will be coming out as quickly as we can get it. Big things for the voters, and this is what you need to make sure everybody understands. Primaries in May 24th. Anybody that's being voted on in the primaries, for every seat that's being voted for, that is basically the election. Every single one of those, that will decide the election, because everybody's running on the same party ticket. So that is not the mayor or the city council. That's your state level representatives, the county commission. board of education, all of that kind of stuff. So, but that is something that is everybody really needs to understand. The true elections for those seats, if they're being voted on in May in the primaries, that is in essence the election for those seats. Whoever wins that, they're going to be the only ones on the ballot come August and November. So, and then of course we'll have the mayoral and all the rest of the fun stuff coming up in August. But right now we're going to focus on the state level stuff and what's going to be voted on in May. So more info on that, getting more and more info put on our website. If you go, we've got profiles for all the candidates, and you can get easy links to all their websites, social media, whatever they've got, and then more info on their questions, biographies, all that kind of good stuff. So
a very important Senate race coming up.
Yes, for the
we just got back from Washington D.C. and got a chance to spend some time with our representatives, congressmen, and senators, and hear what they're doing, see what they're doing, and they really are coming out of COVID now and beginning to open back up, and it was a great time to go and actually get a chance to talk about our cities and our plans and the help that they can give us, and get some assurances that they're on board with what our agenda is and the direction that we're going. It was a great trip.
All right. Well, okay. So this evening, what are we going to talk about? We are talking about the medical waste facility, and there's a couple of things I want to get clear out in the open, so that there's no room for misunderstanding, and so everybody understands the context with how we're all discussing all of this stuff, and we'll introduce everybody here in just a second. So the elephant in the room, not that he is the size of an elephant, though he seems a little worried about how he looks on camera. We've got the attorney Josh Sullivan here from Knowles & Sullivan, and obviously we're sitting here in our studio that we've been using here in Knowles & Sullivan. Obviously been at the forefront of fighting the rendering plant. There's a lot of folks that have tried to say this is Rainbow City's rendering plant, and there's a lot of differences, but the reality is that Josh is sitting here representing Bob and working with the whole of the company of MWT. We'll get into a little bit more about that. But and then of course I'm sitting here. I've become friends with the team here at Knowles & Sullivan. But I'm representing Advanced Etowah and what we're trying to do in the discussion about how our community is growing, how our government is operating. So I am not trying to fight for MWT, nor am I trying to shut MWT down. What I really, really want to see is that we have a good conversation as a community as we move forward. So I mentioned, the first thought when all of this came up was awesome. This is not what I would prefer to have as the first issue that we have for coming out of the rendering plant is something that deals with medical waste. We'll get into, some stark differences in a lot of this stuff. But there's some big things, some big takeaways for you guys that I want you to see. Number one, the process. Nobody's saying we're following the process and not explaining the process. We're going to explain the process. We're going to explain why they're following the process openly and why they're actually going above and beyond the process, meaning they're sitting right here, willing to answer questions. So the mayor has a different opinion, that he's happy that we're ripping the Band-Aid off, but I think he likes to work harder than I do. So that's why he's the mayor and I am not. But it is what it is. We're excited to have folks that are willing to take a look and invest in our community. But there's definitely conversation that is good, valid conversation amongst everybody. So wanted to get that out of the way. The other thing, Coosa River Keepers and GASP, we both, I've been talking with them. I know separately representing MWT, Josh has been in contact with those those groups, offering on behalf of MWT, anything that is needed, that they might need to better understand what is being built. And the short version, they could not join us tonight because they've got a bunch of other stuff going on. But basically, both of them are saying there's no red flags with any of this from the environmental side of things. So I wanted to get that out of the way. They are not in any way endorsing MWT in this project. That would be a bad precedent for them to obviously set as an organization. But they are excited to know that we care what they have to say. And I've joked with them that they've kind of created a double-edged sword in bringing so much awareness to our community, that ADEM is not they're not the ones that we need to look to for the requirements, or what we should really desire in our community from an environmental standpoint. And thankfully, MWT and the team have been more than willing to offer whatever help that is needed to those groups, so that we can know. So there's also a lot of the technology and a lot of information that was covered at the open meeting in Rainbow City a couple of weeks ago. I don't want to completely rehash all of that. We will get to talking about the technology and some of the stuff and a little bit of background. But I think from my standpoint, from what I'm seeing, what we really need to move into tonight is some discussion about how does this fit? Does it fit? What's the so what of having it here? Can it attract additional things? But arguing the technology, the environmental side, the trust of the people involved. I think that conversation has been had a lot. Obviously, if you've got questions about that and want to continue that, then can be. But in my opinion, where we need to move to as a community is the discussion it seems. I mean, it's good enough for me that I've got Coosa Riverkeeper and Gas both saying that we don't see any big red flags. Nothing's freaking us out. In fact, it doesn't look like they're going to have much emissions at all and nothing going into the water. So from the environmental side, then, I'm not really sure what more we need to discuss with that. Of course, if you've got more research that you've done or questions, then that's why we're here. So that's a lot. Hopefully I have covered it all and set our standard of kind of, and given some context to the conversation we're having as we move forward tonight. So with that said, obviously, Mayor Taylor, most of you, all of you should know who he is, especially if you've watched anything about the rendering plant and if you've been paying attention to Rainbow City. We talked about Josh Sullivan from Knowles and Sullivan here, and I will let Bob Bloom, if you'll talk just a quick little intro about your background as kind of the resident investor owner here that's local, and then who we've got online to answer questions.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Bob Blum, and Michael, I want to say I appreciate you having put this together tonight. This is an opportunity for us to basically share the information to the public and just let them understand what we're doing. I think sometimes the name of the operation of regulated medical waste, that tends to sometimes be a scary misnomer to some, and to some it's a real thing, basically from past practices. In today's time, we have come up with what we feel like is some really strong technology that Dave Cardenas, my partner, has brought to the business, and that is the waste management business, specifically in healthcare. Our team with Melissa and David and myself and a few others, we've been able to actually come up with a team that can manage materials that have been mismanaged for a long time. And what I'm referring to is pharmaceuticals in the healthcare business. And it's been going on to where it used to be any kind of a medical facility today would end up putting their waste into a red bag, and it would go out the back door of a facility, of a hospital or a medical practice. When that occurred, it was not illegal for it to happen, but it was not necessarily fully legal to the standards in which it was occurring. So we had a lot of things that were going into the ground that technically should not be going there. And the proof of the pudding today is what we've been seeing from an analytical and a testing standpoint, and it is becoming more and more prevalent, and it's coming into our homes every day. And there has to be a better way, especially in this society today. If nothing more than going forward for our kids' benefit and our grandkids, we need to at least take action to be managing it, getting it out of the ground, to try to do it safely and to minimize the liabilities to other people that it's affecting. So my background real quick, I've been in this waste business before it was a business, in the hazardous waste management business. And I came into Alabama in the waste management business. Essentially, that's been over 32 years ago. My wife and I came down here with our 3 boys, and they were small then. And I expected to be here 5 years, and I'm still here 34 years later, basically. But the bottom line is that it's a safe community. It is a community that we really feel at home at. We feel like there is a benefit to be here and to be a part of it, especially when you see what's going on in this whole region or with the cities today and what other people are experiencing. Is a very safe area. And we're glad to be a part of that. So we are very conscientious of what we do and how we do it in this community. And we feel like we've been a strong part of that over the time we've been here in Southside, where I live. So we've been basically looking at what can we do to grow the communities. I mean, we've lost some of our biggest industries. We felt like this was something that would go hand in hand with what we have heard from leadership in Gadsden, which is, let's look at the retirement community, the healthcare community, trying to beef that up. And that involves, making some changes and putting marketing out there, but trying to draw in the proper businesses to do so. And there's a lot of ways to do that. We felt like this technology is a strong technology to support that specific goal. And since I've been in this business for so long, I'm heavily involved on the regulatory aspects of it. We're accustomed to staying in the regulatory world, to doing it to the standard of the feds and the state and to the local environment. And that's extremely important today, is to manage it safely. I wouldn't be in this business this long if I hadn't been doing it correctly. I can tell you that. So we're glad to be here, and we're glad to be part of this community.
All right. And so we've got Melissa joining us. And where are you these days? Are you in the Dakotas? Is that?
No, I am located in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay. All right. I can't remember. Were you in New Mexico on the last meeting? Or was I misunderstanding that you were in a different area? You were someplace cold. That's all I remember. Maybe it wasn't.
Yes, it was 28 degrees and there was a blizzard. So yes, but it was still New Mexico.
Gotcha. Well, hey, well, I'm glad you made it through the blizzard. So we talk about the technology aspect of this, and that's the main reason we've got you here. If you could give us just a quick explanation of the process of what is the technology that's being implemented. We as a community listen to a lot of mumbo jumbo of new innovative technology that is going to save the world and not cause any smell or anything like that. That's what we've been listening to for the last year. So obviously we're pretty sensitive to this. But if you could just kind of address the technology and also you guys have been operating the technology. It's been out there. And I think that's a key thing for everybody to understand. So would you mind taking a quick second? I don't know. I know there's a lot to it, but over to you.
Sure, absolutely. So the dictionary definition of pyrolysis is that it is a thermal chemical conversion process that takes place in an anaerobic environment and at a negative pressure. So that doesn't really help people out in terms of understanding it unless you're really up on your science. And so I think an easy way to think about this process is if you were to start with a box, a sealed box, and you're going to suck all of the air out of that box. So at that point, you've created a negative pressure inside the box compared to the ambient, compared to the pressure that's outside the box. You're then going to heat that box. And so if you put waste or anything actually that you want to decompose, if you put something inside that box, you're not actually burning the box. You're not burning the waste because there's no oxygen left inside the box. And as that damper opens so that there's sufficient oxygen to get to the flame, if you don't have the damper open, then it's not going to burn. And so if you put waste inside a sealed box, a sealed container, with no oxygen and at a negative pressure, what you're going to have is a decomposition. It's not going to burn, so it's not going to combust or incinerate, but rather it's going to decompose. And so the complex molecules that make up whatever the substance is that was inside the box are going to start to break down. And so you're going to be left with the constituent elements that made up those molecules. So the example that I had used in the previous meeting was of aspirin. So aspirin is made up of carbon and hydrogen and oxygens. Now they're all bound together in a molecule that is the aspirin molecule. But when that molecule pyrolyzes, that molecule pulls apart. And so you're left with carbon and hydrogen and oxygen. You're not left with aspirin. So it has decomposed into its constituent elements. So that's pyrolysis really in a nutshell. That's the technology, I think, in an easy way to understand it. Does that touch you?
All right. Well, as is all things going today, we seem to have some issues with our internet connection, but I think we caught most of that. And I hope you guys again go back and watch. We went ad nauseum into the technology of it. Some pretty interesting stuff. Could you touch on? There's some work and research into using pyrolysis with NASA and extended space travel, and this is purely because I'm in charge of the computer right now and get to ask the questions that I want to ask, and that actually sounded kind of fascinating. And not that I want to travel through space, but
well, I absolutely, I think it's really quite exciting as well. Now, you mentioned you all have been sharing at length about this. You found things in the world that's not going to have any smell and so on, and transport you to the other planet, so with all of those new things. Or if it's just some new technology that's supposed to make our cars cleaner or whatever the case might be. And I think what's important for people to remember about pyrolysis is that the technology is not actually new, unless you're saying something that's about 50 years old is new. So NASA has been experimenting with pyrolysis, various applications of pyrolysis since about the 1960s or 70s. And the studies, at least the studies that I have seen, were focusing on two primary implementations of pyrolysis technology. One was to actually deploy on space shuttles that would allow astronauts to convert the wastes that are going to accumulate over the course of manned spaceflight to Mars, for example, convert those wastes into necessary raw materials that they need in order to power their spaceflight. So things like oxygen, for example, which becomes quite important if you have manned spaceflight. The other way that NASA has been experimenting with pyrolysis technology is as an alternative mechanism for generating fuel. So one of the things that's really quite exciting about this pyrolysis technology that is employed by MWT is that the process is self-sustaining. Once it gets started, once pyrolysis has started and the feedstock is being decomposed within it, those constituent elements that we talked about are going to recombine, and they do so and create a synthetic gas, a synthetic fuel can be utilized, excuse me, can be utilized to continue to power the reaction. So it doesn't require the input of external fossil fuels to keep pyrolysis going. But what that also means, and what it seems as though NASA was exploring or continues to explore, is the idea that pyrolysis can take waste and can turn it into fuel. And the fuel that results from pyrolysis is comparable to, in terms of the amount of energy contained within it, it is comparable to fossil fuels that we use today. So in some ways, it's exciting because it represents an alternative fuel source than the fossil fuels that are just causing us so much difficulty when we go to the gasoline pumps here today. So NASA has been exploring exploring ways of utilizing this technology going forward in the space program, and they've been looking at it since at least the late 60s and early 70s.
Well, I'll tell you, at $5 a gallon for diesel, if you guys can figure out how to build a pyrolysis motor for my truck, I am more than happy to run garbage in my vehicle. So yes, that was something that I thought was pretty interesting, and I think that's also a good leap into kind of understanding the level of where this technology is. And it's obviously very different than just incineration. But this, I mean, if we're looking at it for manned space travel, then perhaps it's an environmentally or more environmentally friendly process than a lot of alternatives. So we did have a question on here about explain the benefit of the high temperature in the process.
Well, I'm not sure what about the benefit. So I think what we need to understand is pyrolysis happens at specific temperature thresholds, and the specific temperatures define the nature of pyrolysis. So, for example, you have pyrolysis that's called a flash pyrolysis. You have pyrolysis, a kind of a fast pyrolysis. You can have a catalytic pyrolysis. So the temperatures that are utilized by MWT's process are such that the process itself, the pyrolysis process, is going to continue at or within a certain temperature range. So I think that's just been really confusing. I'm not sure I've helped. Let me try that again. If you think about it in terms of a temperature setting on your refrigerator, you can have your refrigerator set to really any sort of temperature that's going to keep your food cool enough for your preferences. But if you go down too low or you go down too high, you change the circumstances, right? If you go down too low, things are going to start to freeze and your milk's going to freeze and you're not going to have your cereal. If you go too warm, your meat is going to spoil. And so there's a certain temperature range that needs to be maintained in order for everything within your refrigerator to stay in proper form. And it's a similar thing with pyrolysis, where the kind of technology that the MWT utilizes requires a certain temperature range for processing in order for the decomposition to happen most efficiently given the technology. So our temperature range, the particularly high temperatures that we employ, are part of that technological decision making and how pyrolysis is utilized. I'm not sure whether that helps, but if it does not, give us another question. I'll see whether I can do better.
I think that's and again, I would refer back to I think we probably spent a good 30-40 minutes a few weeks ago really getting deep into the technology. So of course, I used to always joke in the military and the Navy flying around. If I heard anybody on the radio speaking with a British accent, I just assumed they were right. So the Queen's English just seems like it brings an authenticity and an authority to it. So, yeah. So yeah, guys. So if you've got additional questions, let's see. So, well, we've got one here. So, you don't produce liquids.
That's correct. The pyrolysis process employed by MWT, the technology does not produce any liquid waste stream. So the only production is, or the only byproduct rather, is a pyrolytic carbon char. And then also you have the various gaseous products, the primary one, which sustains the reaction for us, which is what makes it self-sustaining and environmentally friendly.
Okay. And Tom, if you missed my entire speech at the beginning, I apologize for making it so long. But so as far as producing a liquid, Coosa River Keepers has looked into all the paperwork that's been submitted with ADEM and anything that else that has been needed, and they're not seeing anything in terms of a threat to releasing liquids or additional fluid, water, any byproduct into our river, which, as we all know, Coosa River Keepers, they are the mouth for the river. So that is what that's all they care about, is protecting the Coosa River. So, all right. Product liquids, not waste liquids. I think so. What is the? All right. I think I'm seeing where Tom is going with this question. So, what is the end result of the process, and where does it go? And is that hopefully that makes sense. I think that's what Tom is getting at with you're not producing a liquid that you're hauling off somewhere, but what are you producing?
I'll be glad to address that if I may. And Melissa, please chime in if I don't technically address it to the right standard. But essentially, once the pharmaceutical or the regulated medical waste comes through the process, it actually comes out as a char. That char is a reduction of the original volume, and it actually is a very fine black-looking solid material. It's actually about 92% reduction of the front end of what was fed into the system. So it's about 1/10 of what we started with. That material will actually be removed from the tube, from the pyrolysis chamber once it comes out, and it actually will go into a roll-off container. That roll-off container will go into a special landfill, and that landfill has a leachate collection system. It's a subtitle landfill that is designed specifically for industrial wastes.
Okay. We've got a question about the landfill. So while you're talking about it, we might as well dive in. That is not a landfill located in Etowah County, because we don't have one that meets the requirement. Correct?
I don't believe there's one in Etowah County. I can't be 100% positive of that. What we have in this area, I believe, is more for local sanitary trash, construction and debris, and those types of items. But I don't believe we have a industrial subtitle C or D
Okay.
In this area.
And let me just make sure we got all that.
Speaking of that, right quick, Bob, the char material that is produced, the chemical composition of it, what is it? I think that you have explained before, it's a sterile product pretty much once it comes out. Can you explain that?
Sure. Once the material comes through the pyrolysis process, basically it becomes non-hazardous. The properties that made it hazardous actually are eliminated. So what we have is a concentrate of basically, for lack of a better term, an ash, essentially. And it's collected. It is not, it could go into a landfill that is not a subtitle landfill, but we have chosen to send it into a landfill that has a higher standard for management with a national company that has a sound track record. And that just happens to be outside of Etowah County, the ones we've used in the past with other companies that we've been associated with.
All right. And which, again, the question I asked about NASA and their research, I think that speaks a lot to the byproduct that you end up with this. I mean, they don't want to build a spaceship and end up with a byproduct that is toxic. So how much, let's see, let me make sure I get this question right. How big would the landfill be? I mean, do we have any idea? I mean, Martha's asking about that. I mean, this is the landfill is not part of your business. That is,
we are not
a
affiliated
pre-existing
with this landfill.
Okay.
There are some national companies that are pretty much buying up a lot of the smaller ones today and taking it to a different level of compliance, just because the regulations are becoming more strict in landfills. And the reason being is because of the leachates and the collection systems that are necessary and required to keep things out of our water systems.
All right. I think I'm good from Tom Johnson, who was asking about the liquids and the temperature. So great. Again, guys, if you've got some questions, I think we're kind of about to the point where I feel like we've kind of covered most of the technology, and I think a lot more of this is going to be go back and watch that video that we did the live from Rainbow City. So plus I need to move into something where I give the mayor a chance to talk because yeah. I don't want him mad at me. But what is a little different tonight, that open meeting, which what we'll talk on now is kind of the process. But that meeting was not your meeting, Mayor, or the city's meeting. That was a meeting by MWT. So Josh, could you just kind of real quick step through what has been the process to get, I mean, so and this is not something that just came up in the last couple of months. This is what's the process that's been followed, and what is the process moving forward?
Sure. Yeah. Oh, and first of all, let me kind of touch on a subject as well. I think a main issue that came out of the rendering plant case was not only about the rendering plant itself and the effects that would have upon the city and upon the general public, but one of the main issues was the issue of a transparent government and open government. What our politicians need to realize at this point is we are the ones paying the bills. We are the ones that have elected them. So I think a major issue and a major problem we had as a part of the process before is we had some politicians and some governmental bodies that did not seem to want to listen to what the public that elected them there, there was a sense of being tone deaf to that process. Now, as a part of the permit process that my client's having to go through is it's a new process. It was just passed, I think, within the past year or past couple of years, and we're kind of really on the front end of going through this process. In terms of the state legislature, what they wanted to do is, instead of ADEM making these local calls, they wanted the local calls to be made by local governments. And a part of this permitting process that my client's going through is to push it back upon the local government to get us to where we are today. This did not happen overnight. There was a lot of process, a lot of procedures that Rainbow City had to go through. But I think there was some background checks, and maybe is that something you can kind of explain later, Mayor, in terms of what the city's done to even get to this point. But there was a very detailed process way before today and way before that last meeting that has gotten us here today. So the main process is we had to do a lot of detailed information, background checks that the city had to do as to not only the company, but the owners of it, the people that would be involved in it. And so that was a thorough process that the city went through. I know in prior conversations with Bob that it was very detailed. The city has not just done just a simple rubber stamp of this. They've been very, very thorough with the process. But then beyond that, once that they were satisfied with this, then there was, I believe, an initial approval that y'all did to at least start the process. Now, that's not the final approval. It was just basically letting us go to the next step. Now, back about a month ago, we took that second step as a part of the process. And that was to have a public meeting where, and it's a meeting controlled by my client, where they set it up and answer direct questions and give the public a chance to be directly involved as a part of the process. So that has happened. Now, the next step that will be coming up from this is, and again, I'm very appreciative to Mayor as to the process that he has done. I think it is something that, assuming that others had followed a similar process before, it may have, well, I'm not going to say that it would have ended in a different result, but it would at least been a more transparent, honest process. The mayor and also the city, y'all have been completely transparent and open with this, and that's what I think is what I like, and I know that the client has also been very appreciative of that process. So that the next step is going to be a public hearing that the city of Rainbow City is going to hold or is going to conduct, I guess. And that's going to be on March 31st at 6 p.m. or at 5 p.m. Sorry, and I'm assuming it's going to be there at Rainbow City Hall.
That's right, in our council chamber.
And then, assuming that the next step from that, well, and as a part of that meeting, the public's going to have a chance to come in and have any comments, any questions, or basically just at least offer opinions to the local government as to what they feel about the company being located here. And then the next step after that is the city's going to have a public vote. They're going to be on the record, yay or nay, either way. And so, assuming everything goes well, that public hearing or that meeting will occur on April 11th. Now, one thing I wanted to explain with this, and I think is very important when as to talking with Bob and Dave, it's always been very important that we be as transparent and open about this. As I've always explained to all my clients, if there's nothing to hide, don't hide it. Don't act like we are hiding it. So very grateful to Bob and Dave that they've allowed me to be very, very transparent as a part of the process. Part of that is we have reached out and that the client has allowed me to share information with GASP, with Coosa River Keepers, to at least give them whatever information, the extent that they have any questions, any concerns. We've been on the forefront trying to make sure that this is something that not only that the citizens are happy with, but in terms of some of these local groups, which are excellent groups, that they also have a say-so as a part of the process, and that there's no major concerns with it. Again, the process is not only just following what the legal steps are. We have done that and certainly will do that. But my client has been very dedicated and very, very committed to make sure that we go above and beyond that. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this presentation.
Absolutely.
And, absolutely. Thank you to Advanced Etowah and Michael for letting us have this opportunity.
And for the record, he didn't threaten to kick me out of their office if I didn't do it. So, this has been a very interesting year that we've all gone through, and one quick thing that I think is worth noting. So you've done a lot of work through close to 2 decades now with Bob on various things.
I started practicing in 2001. I'm not sure the first time that Bob and I met, but it's been a long time. So
okay,
I've had the pleasure of knowing Bob and Bob's family. Bob may not want this to be anyway. Bob has an excellent family. They have 3 sons, two of which are very active in terms of they are firemen and. And not necessarily local per se, but they're at least in the state. And many times I always look at people as to how you raise kids and as to how your kids come out. It's not always reflective of your parents, but can be a fairly good sign. And I think Bob has raised some excellent kids. But yeah, it's always been a pleasure to know Bob and work with him.
So this was not just Bob didn't just show up at your doorstep and say, hey, I got some legal work I need some help with. So back to the meeting next week. This is, I guess, for you, Mayor, could you guys technically vote on it next week?
We could. I mean, you can do that through a parliamentary procedure of asking for a unanimous consent to consider, but we're not going to do that. We're going strictly by the House bill that we were given. We've been meticulous in doing that. My whole staff is involved in that, and we've had to slow it down when it needed to be slowed down and speed it up hardly ever. As a matter of fact, we're just not going to do that.
Well, and
we've spent quite a bit of time just making sure that we're meeting time frames. These things have a lot of, you've got to have 10 days, then 45 days, then 15 days. And some of it's time constraint. When I say that we have to speed up, we have to make sure that we do one meeting has to be within 15 days. Another has to be notification put out to make sure that we're living up to the Open Meetings Act. And all of those things are being done, not only by my office, but the office of the city clerk, who is actually statewide is one of the most highly respected city clerks in the state of Alabama.
Well, I think we've all become, as a community, a big fan of the Open Meetings Act, and we have also gotten very sick and tired of suspending the rules. As we have seen, and that's one thing. I'm not here to try and make Rainbow City the greatest ever, but it's a good. I mean, I live there, but I think it is worth noting the contrasts and why this is different, not just from the technology standpoint of this company, from the rendering plant, but just what has occurred. And one thing that has kind of occurred to me is that if you went back and watched all of our videos, all the video discussion about the rendering plant over the year and a half, if you could turn that into quite a drinking game for taking a shot every time the word process is thrown in there. But that's one thing throwing you a little softball there to point out that, the intention is not to suspend the rules and just throw this, shove this one on the citizens, but allow discussion.
The use of executive privilege is something that has to be really held. It has to be held close. You don't want to be doing the work of the citizenry behind their back. And there are times when we do that. We do that not only to protect the goodwill and the finances of the city in the case of buying property.
Right.
If we're in the midst of buying a piece of property, we don't want the property's value to go up. We don't want the people that are selling it to be bombarded with additional offers, knowing that a city is interested in a piece of property. And that will take a minute. We go into an executive session and we speak only to that one thing. And in executive session, and in our case, I've had two. Both dealt with buying and purchasing of property. It lasts a few seconds, and then you're back out. And it's this is what we're doing. We've struck a deal, on this piece of property, and I need you to fund the purchase price of it. And we go back and we bring it back up and talk about why we're there. We pass it, and that makes it a done deal. I can't seal up a purchase without the knowledge of the council, which again is another area of transparency, and that is that I act as the executor and the executive operating officer for the city, and I do that, and then I go to them to make sure that they affirm my decisions, and that decision then becomes theirs. Gotcha. I am a voting member because of being a less than 12,000 city. It allows me to be a voting member, but I'm a voting member without veto.
All right.
And also, just something to point out there as a compliment to Rainbow City, there's not been one iota of this process concerning my client that's been in any type of closed session behind closed doors.
That's right.
So it's been a very open process, and to me, if you want to learn how a city should govern and how a city should work, I'm saying this not only as a resident of a Rainbow City, but it is Rainbow City. They, to me, are the prime example of how a government should operate.
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I've told my staff initially when I came in as mayor. I wanted to deliver premium services. Well, one of the ways to deliver premium services is in the permitting process. Whether it's to build your out shed or she shed or to take in business. We want to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can. And in the case of transparency, all we're doing is carrying out the process that's inside of a House bill. So someone else wrote it. They're asking me to go through with my staff and with my council and approve or disapprove. They asked me to do the forensic discovery of the owners and the principals, and as well as a criminal discovery, a background check. And so we did all of those things. We probably did it to the extreme. We did it to the extreme, obviously, because of the time that we've been in where trust has been breached at times, and or we perceive that it has. And so we just wanted to make sure that we were doing things in the best manner that we possibly could. And I think we have.
All right. So I'm seeing some good questions. That's stuff we need to get to. But real quick, I just want to make sure. So there's a question of how does pyrolysis process differ from what the incinerator process used at the Anniston Army Depot for disposal of chemical weapons stockpile? And then asked about the byproduct, which I think we've already covered. I'm assuming, Melissa, that you are not super familiar with exactly what goes on with chemical waste or chemical weapons disposal at Army, the Army Depot, but I'm assuming it's just the difference between the incinerator process versus the pyrolysis.
That's correct. I do not know anything about the Army Depot that seems to be referenced in that question. So I cannot speak to that process that is utilized there, but I can speak generally about the difference between incineration and pyrolysis. The most substantial difference is the byproduct. Incineration is filthy. It just is. The gaseous emission byproduct is bad for the environment. Full stop. That's all there is to it. Pyrolysis is not. Across all the metrics, EPA thresholds for emissions, pyrolysis, MWT's pyrolysis technology comes in at about 49% cleaner. That is below EPA thresholds for emissions. Now, you have to bear in mind is incinerators are being phased out because they cannot meet the EPA thresholds, the EPA requirements for emissions, because it is just so dirty. So that's the first thing, the most substantial difference. But from a scientific process side of things, incineration is burning. It has to happen in the presence of oxygen. And pyrolysis is not burning, it's thermochemical conversion, it's decomposition, which takes place in the absence of oxygen. So from a scientific process side of things, they are not similar at all, because one requires oxygen to sustain the reaction, which is incineration. The other has to have no oxygen, which is pyrolysis. So that's the difference in that regard.
All right. Well, I hope that that answers that. And so now I appreciate you guys dropping some questions in there that are the pot stirrers, which is really what I think we need to move on to, is the discussion about how this fits in our community. And there's one big one that encompasses a lot of stuff, and I think we'll pull that up here in a second. But one question about why bring another waste plant when we're still in a legal fight to keep another out. So, and we're going to get into that. Trust me, I'm going to give everybody a chance. But from my viewpoint, for one thing, I think it is extremely disingenuous to say to put the animal waste rendering plant and put that in the same category as this this facility, and both in size, scale, technology, what's being done. I think that's an extreme oversimplification of the comparison of the two. I understand the intent, that yeah, hey, we're dealing with waste, and I'll let them talk a little bit more about some of that stuff. But I hope everybody understands that's not a fair comparison. And I obviously, maybe I sound like I'm, trying to support MWT in this. I genuinely don't think that's a fair comparison if you research it at all. I understand the intent of the question. So the bigger one that covers a lot more in that I'm going to bring up, because I think it just pretty much brings it all right to the surface. Rick Kemp, 3 questions. Why does Rainbow City and Etowah County want to allow any waste company to come and build in our communities? Question 2, why can't we recruit industries that pay well and provide benefits that allow them to support their families? Question 3, who are the people in Rainbow City and Etowah County that earn their living promoting waste companies and will benefit financially from this waste company? And before we jump in and I turn this over to getting some answers from these guys, I completely understand the frustration and the comments that are out there. I would also have the conversation for us as a community that growing and attracting better industries, all the stuff we've been talking about that we're pushing for, to bring in companies that raise the pay scale. That is not stuff that's going to happen overnight. Keep in mind, this is a process that has been going on These guys have been looking at developing this company for a while. They are not touting it, and I'm going to take the words out of their mouth. They are not touting it as they're bringing in these phenomenal jobs, as we've heard from, particularly from Pilgrim's Pride, as this is some revolutionary thing that's going to completely, it's a good place to work. It will be good jobs, but it's only going to be about 12 to 15. That has not been the selling point that they have had. But I think we need to have a reasonable understanding, explanation, or understanding as a community. We've talked about master plans. The mayor's only been in office now for what?
15 months.
Yeah, 15 months. To really get to the point where we get to the stuff that, and don't take this the wrong way, Bob, Dave, or Melissa, the stuff that we really want in here, that you're referencing. We're talking 3-5+ years, realistically, to become a consistent thing. There's a lot of culture and stigma issues in Etowah County that have got to be overcome to attract those businesses and all that kind of stuff. So I hope that makes some sense. I understand the sentiment, but I am sure that, number one, no one in Rainbow City went out and recruited this business. In fact, I think the main person that's probably been involved with this would be you, the mayor, right?
That's right.
So, and you've given up your salary as the mayor.
That's right.
So if it's
Should've
about,
rethought that.
right. So if it's about making money, and again, I get frustrated with people that get mad because people, make comments like that, or like, I get it. It's 2022 America. We assume every politician is stealing money from us. That's just the world we live in now. And that's something that if you're getting into politics, you got to have the thick skin and understand. But at the same time, we as citizens, I think, need to have the adult conversation about that. So I don't disagree at all with what you're saying, Rick, and the frustration that you're expressing. And I think all of us sitting in this room would say the same things. We'd love to see where we're getting into companies that are paying $35, $40 an hour, the high tech companies, or they're really raising. But that being said, let's talk about how this does fit into the moving forward for Rainbow City, and what doors might it open. So Mayor, you seem like you're itching to jump on this one. So
I really am. I think I'd want to start with question one, and that is, and the word used is, why would we allow this? First off is that, would you really want to put that kind of pressure on me? Because if you were to come and say that we're going to put another grocery store in Rainbow City, do I turn it down because we already have two? There's a lot about using the word allowance. I'm in a position, a gateway, that this business owner comes to the gate. He says, I have this. This all checks the box. I look, I put together my own checklist, make sure that he does check every box. At the end of that, he gets to go through a permitting process. We make sure that that's all permitted. We make sure that it's all public. And in doing that, and there was always a hang up on the word, well, this is a requirement. Absolutely, it's a requirement, and be thankful for that. And so we're just going to reach out and make sure that we do all of the required things. But my position is not a position of whether I dictate, you get to come in, you don't get to come in. If they fulfill all of the requirements and the vetting process of coming and doing business in Rainbow City, as long as everything is in place, we pass that.
Right.
That's our job.
Right.
And it's a job that a lot of people say they won't until they get it. Well, I'm the guy that will actually take all of that responsibility onto myself, and I serve with 5 other people that will do the same thing. If this at any point falls apart, it falls apart. And, we go to the next thing. I think the second question was, why can't we recruit industries that pay well and provide benefits? Well, there's any number of reasons why. But I can promise you this, if we got 3,000 jobs tomorrow that we're paying $125,000 a year. There's several problems that go with that. Number one is we could not give them the employees. We don't have the economic development and workforce development in place to provide for that. So, it's kind of a crawl, walk, run. We're in the midst of our crawl. Our crawl will bring about some of these clean industries, these environmentally safe industries. And once we do that, we become an attractant for those things. Now, whether it'll be waste or whether it'll be a pharmaceutical company that wants to be close by so that they can, render off their waste product, a pill that didn't get punched correctly. I don't even know how they do it. But whatever the machinery doesn't do well, they can send to them for them to destroy. Or products that's sent back to them. Those are the people that we need to go to next. We need to see the people at Pfizer and get in front of them. Well, we can't do that until we have some sort of attractant. And one of the things that we have to begin to do, which is what we're working with Alan Smith at Gadsden State Community College, is to begin to put together some advanced manufacturing, some short certificates and things like that, so that we can eventually fill that mega site that the county currently has out at Little Canoe Creek. It's not an overnight process. If anybody could get it done overnight, I would hope it would be me, because I don't like the way that government works slow. But again, I'm subject to a set of standards, and it's task, condition, standard. You have a task, you have a condition. If you meet that standard, you get to go through the gate. And I'm just a gatekeeper.
Well, I'd like to respond to that after he's finished also.
I'm good.
No, well, and Bob, I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, what's from your perspective as the guy that's been living in Etowah for a few decades, and bringing this business in, what's kind of your thought about all of this?
Well, number one, I'd like to just say that this is a very difficult process to go through. We have been starting with this process, Dave and I, for probably close to over a year, talking about the process of pyrolysis and what it's all about and what the benefits are and what the application can be. After we've identified that this is a good place to do that, mainly because of the location in the Southeast and the Eastern U.S., 8 months ago, I actually approached the mayor before I even went to anyone else in Rainbow City, and I said, hey, I've got a business we want to talk to you about. And he said, well, let's set up a meeting. I gave him the details. That was 8 months ago. And I made a pitch to the council members and some of the other administrators in his organization. And I'll tell you, I had no idea how it would be received. And we started there. 8 months ago, there was a lot of steps, and it was a starting process. And it was interesting because one of the questions that came out of this meeting was, what happens if you don't get a permit? I said, well, I guess we end up going home. That's the only thing I can say. But let me tell you why I think this is a great idea. This business, this pharmaceutical, this regulated medical waste is regulated under the state. It's got to be regulated by somebody. So ADEM has that responsibility. They push it down to the community, the local community, to take care of these steps. Very detailed. And all these time limits that the mayor and his team have been very diplomatic in being sure that it's met. And I've sat with each one of his team over there, and I can tell you it has been just matter of fact. We've had timelines, and we've done it to a T. And the whole process has been investigated up to this point. And maybe you've hit a pothole, or you hit a slowdown, but 8 months and we're still going on this thing. It's not a fast process, but the reason being is it's being looked at by so many different people and so many different eyes and so many different regulators to be sure it's the proper fit. Just because it's called regulated medical waste, it could just be another healthcare service, essentially. Where the business model is set up for 70 to 80% pharmaceuticals, but that happens to fall in the healthcare realm under ADEM. They're the ones that are managing this. They're the ones that are controlling, and they've pushed it to the local government to verify that, they don't want that responsibility after seeing perhaps it was the rendering plant that made that happen. I don't know. I'm just assuming that.
And I think,
yeah.
I'm sorry, Bob.
Go ahead, please.
I think that one of the things that people need to understand is that, Bob came to me and we had a meeting like I do quite often with people that are wanting to come do business in Rainbow City. And, and at that point, we passed that off to not just the mayor's office and my staff, but then it goes to the building department, which has a department head and several people working there, including mapping and zoning and that kind of thing. And then at the same time, our revenue department is looking at this to make sure that the forensic discovery is looked at and correct. Our city attorney gets all of this information so that he can go through it and make sure that we're hitting our timelines just right. And then once again, the person that keeps us all out of jail, and that's our city clerk, Beth Lee, her department then takes it and analyzes and breaks it down to the nth degree. And in doing that, at the end of that, it comes back to the mayor and council. He's required, so many things have been required of Bob, and until he, discloses those things to us, we don't move. Mm-hmm. When he does, the machine moves again.
And also, as important part of this process, Rainbow City has not offered, promised anything. They've been they're that gatekeeper, but in terms of doing that gatekeeping, there's been no promises, guarantees, nothing underhanded at all as a part of the process. Let me also just briefly address getting back to the first question that was being asked. I know some other people have commented that we are accepting another rendering plant. This is apples and oranges. It's not a rendering plant, first of all. But to kind of explain some of the differences between the entities, when we're talking about the rendering plant and all the negative effects that was going to come from that, you just look at all the processes that they had to go through to get to where that they were trying to. Number one is that there was a wastewater permit that they were required to get. There was a on-site wastewater system that they were going to have to manage just to discharge to the sewer. In this situation, there is no process waters that are going to be discharged at all. They don't require a wastewater discharge permit. In terms of a air permit, there was I think one or two air permits that the rendering plant was trying to obtain, or may have obtained. This one, because of the process, EPA and ADEM have said it doesn't even require any air permit. So in terms of the area, we should all be about growing the economic base of our county. But we should do it in a greener and a cleaner way. And based upon everything I've seen, everything I've looked at, this is a cleaner and greener company, and is much more different than what is compared to a rendering plant. But beyond that, this is, in terms of handling this type of waste, it is the best way, or the cleanest way, and a fairly, to me, a friendly economic, or a very friendly environmental way of handling this.
So, and I'm going to wrap up the process discussion with this too, with the stark contrast and the mayor talking about being the gateway, and again, why I say it's such a disingenuous comparison. And you're talking about recruiting. The rendering plant, even if it was apples and apples, that involved the sale of a quarter to a half of the airport, which was government property. So there's a lot more involved, and a lot more that the government was involved with all the way through the FAA and all that kind of stuff. So we also have to remember, in this instance, this in essence is a private transaction between private businesses with private landowners. And so it is also different whether we like it or not. Another major thing is the zoning is already appropriately met. So there's no requirement to rezone or go through any of that kind of stuff. But there does come a point where when you've got private business transactions going on, to the mayor's point of being the gatekeeper of approving or disapproving businesses that come in here, there is something that we have to all accept in just the way business operates. Fortunately, we've got a situation where we do have a company, and this is the other stark contrast, is go look at the history of the company. You want to compare and contrast Pilgrim's Pride, again, not an apples to apples comparison with MWT. I think it's been made fairly clear to me. Maybe I'm missing something. Either David and Melissa and Bob are really, really, really slick talkers, and I'm easily fooled. But I don't think that's the case. They've been very transparent and explained a lot of where their heart's at with this as a business, why they're involved with this. They've been clearly explained the technologies, all of that kind of stuff. So, again, I think trying to compare the two, hopefully that kind of wraps up where we're at with the processes that have gone through. It establishes the differences, and then what is to come. And, let's not forget, citizens, the next step is for the community to publicly speak to the city council and to the mayor, which of course has already started occurring. And, we've already got, city leadership that is engaging with the citizenry, not saying they're going to tune them out and ignore them. So sorry, I got to get my jabs in where I can. So let's talk about what, you mentioned, Mayor, the pharmaceutical company that may, we've got to start somewhere with where we move forward, and what's the next thing. What doors might this open? It kind of, let's talk through a little bit of that. Bob, you mentioned that in the open meeting about, medical, the medical development, medical manufacturing side of things. Can you explain a little bit so that as we get to hey, let's get businesses in here that may have bigger jobs and all that kind of stuff.
I did mention that at the very beginning. The mayor touched on it also. And, by having a facility like this here in Rainbow City in Etowah County, number one, this is an operation that is very unique in that it does have the ability to draw other manufacturing and industries in a close proximity to that. And, whether it's Gadsden, Rainbow City, Etowah County, we want to try to grow our community. I mean,
right.
That's to have industry growth like others are experiencing, in this time. So basically, from a standpoint of support, we're looking at, healthcare industry for seniors, for retirement folks. Those were some of the past things that leadership has mentioned, to bring into the community. That has to do with more housing, more healthcare, assisted living facilities. I know we have those already, but there can be more support. When you bring those into the community, you're also bringing in more revenues, and you require more infrastructure to take care of what they're doing and what they're generating. And specifically, we're dealing with pharmaceutical drugs. We're dealing with healthcare materials, regulated medical waste that has to go out that back door. We're here and available for that service, whether it's direct or indirectly. There are companies that actually provide these services already, and you see the trucks around town every day. Some of the major 800-pound gorillas in the room, the Stericycle kind of folks, kind of thing. So those are the communities, those are the companies that actually would utilize a facility like ours. And what better way to do that is to have the infrastructure in place to handle it. The other thing is from nursing homes to even pharmaceutical manufacturing. We used to have a couple of pharmaceutical manufacturing companies in this in the communities. And that is a big draw because, again, it gives them an outlet. It gives them a resource where they can actually have their material handled to the highest level that is required under the regulations. And let's face it, today, when you put things in the ground, it's all about liability reduction today. When it goes in the ground, it's there forever. When you destroy it, when you thermally decompose it into its simplest forms that are non-hazardous, non-toxic, at that point, it changes the whole picture of future liabilities. That is a draw for industry, for communities to bring their businesses into our vicinities. And to me, that's a positive factor. Medical device manufacturing, it's not necessarily pharmaceuticals, but anybody that's building medical instruments, medical instrumentation, again, we've got the places for them to buy the property, to put the facilities. It could be something similar to a tier 1 operation like an automotive. I know they're not into pharmaceutical, but what I'm saying is it could be that kind of a land plot, for them to build and distribute nationally or worldwide or whatever. We have those opportunities available to us. And again, it has to do with marketing of what our strengths are and exploiting them properly to the communities that we want to approach.
So maybe we need to get out there and lobby for incentives to be passed at state and national level to bigger businesses that, hey, if you can hook up and dispose of your waste properly, or in a process like this, then maybe you can get some kickbacks, some tax abatements or something like that. I'm sure that would make you guys happy, but I mean, maybe some of this, the green discussion as a country, maybe it serves in our
Michael, I can see that going to more to the communities in which they operate, more so than the owners and operators, because this is a standard of operation that is cleaner, as Melissa was talking about earlier. It's cleaner, it's better, it's more efficient, and it exceeds all the regulatory standards today. And that's why it is so desirable. There's not a lot of them out there because we actually will have the first commercial permit in this area.
Okay.
That's pretty significant.
Do you have anything else to add in there?
I just want to continue to say that, us taking the rendering plant and deciding that that's going to be the standard, to which we measure every good business, that's fine. That's exactly what we're doing here. People are going to say, well, I think one of the things that was talking about is who benefits financially from this business. It will be the parks and recreation areas of Rainbow City when they're paying in occupational tax. It's going to be the fact that you see us have well-trained and well-equipped police and fire. That's where that money's coming from. I'll promise you this: when I came into office, I've done fairly well for myself up until this point. I've got less money now than I had when I started being the mayor of the city, because it does become costly for me, because I just refuse to take money in the sense. I believe that I'm in a position of service. I'm not asking anybody to start not taking your paycheck, as a politician. I'm not trying to make that the standard. Some people that are doing this, I am doing it as a full-time job, but the money's not the deal. And so the money is not in any way benefiting me from my paycheck, but certainly there's nothing out there that's gonna make this job any easier or any harder by giving me more or less money. And I'm not interested in it. I wouldn't have come out. I think I may have been the first politician, elected official, that came out against the rendering plant. You got to stop for a minute and say, okay, this guy came out against the rendering plant, and now he's standing for this business. Come on, give me a little credit.
Yeah.
I mean, give me just something here.
Yeah, you would, you're certainly, if you were way off track, I think your political credibility in the community would plummet.
It would fall. There's no doubt.
So, and that's obviously, we know, well, maybe not everybody knows, but that is clearly not what drives you in what you're doing. Political aspirations, that's not what led you into being the mayor. But of course, the internet can, say with that what you will, but I think that's the truth. But hopefully, to your point, give them a little credit if given all that's occurred. I just had a fleeting thought. Okay. One other thing that I've seen is a discussion out there that I think is a valid discussion for us as a community to have for MWT. The concern of, okay, y'all are good guys. It's what it appears. You're a good company. You're going to come in here and start this business. What's to say that some larger, national, company that doesn't care, like you sell out in 5 to 10 years, and now we've got this facility in here, that isn't being run, to the standards that you guys, have put. And before y'all get into that, I just want to make sure, whatever your plan is, and a lot of that is your business plan doesn't need to be fully disclosed, and not asking you to do that, and we shouldn't expect or demand that. But again, I think that is a valid question from citizens. But I think if that was your business plan to build something in the modern age, a lot of people have made a lot of money in business by building something up over 5 to 10 years and then selling it off at a steep profit. You took the risk, you put the work in. So I think, for people that are asking that question, to demonize it, I think is a lack of understanding of the way business works. But again, is it a valid conversation? And over to you, Bob, in terms of what is your, what's your answer to that? Again, you don't have to disclose your full business plan, or anything like that.
To speak to that point, basically, the intention is that we are in a very young stage. We have invested, David has invested, and I have invested a lot of time and money into this process, into this startup opportunity in this community. And that really has nothing to do with what we're doing whatsoever. But the thing is that this business is a startup. We consider ourselves environmentalists, number one, and we feel like this is the starting point of something that needs to happen across the whole country. And that's what we're looking at, is the bigger picture on this thing. David has got other units going up in different parts of the country that Melissa's involved with. From a technical standpoint, an environmental standpoint, David's the nuts and bolts and the operations and is the CEO of the business. I'm just one cog in the wheel, but ultimately I can tell you this is a business that we're looking at running long term. I have a family member that's coming out of the military, and he actually is a partner of ours. He was at the awareness session, Chris Blum. He's a major in the Army right now.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, but at some point in time when he finally decides to come out, okay, he will be taking over. He'll be taking over that as a partner and an operating person in this business. And I'll be going more into the regulatory aspects, working with Dave on whatever projects he tasks me with, and working with Melissa on those activities. And we are not looking. We have no intention that, of doing anything different than that. That is what we're looking at doing. Well,
again, I appreciate you, being willing to talk a little bit more than, and like I said at the very beginning of this, my effort in all of this is to facilitate a conversation, a healthy discussion that has been hard for us to have as a community, and try to figure out how we go about doing this in the future. And I don't want to discount anybody's discussions, any questions, and I don't think anybody here, would, and that is definitely a valid and good point as we look at businesses that come in, and particularly when there are businesses that come in that there is an opportunity that there really truly is a gatekeeper, with permitting requirements. But we need to keep in mind there are plenty of businesses that could come set up shop in here that could be extremely unattractive, that there's really very little that the mayor or any of us could do. So I hope, I hope that makes some sense, and I hope we appreciate the fact that they're kind of willing to discuss that with us. I think that's covered most of what I had in mind with covering everything. There are a few other questions that I think are probably some good wrap up questions. Some of it we've sort of addressed already. But before we move on to those, and guys that have got a few questions in there, I don't want you to feel like I'm ignoring you. I'm not. We're going to jump into a couple of those. But is there anything else? I'll start with you, Mayor, that you've kind of got on your mind as we go through and get ready for the meeting next Thursday night and move forward this process.
I think
I'm about out of saying process.
Right. Yeah. The process is out. I think I would say this, my administration and my city hall and my council, we're open to hearing anything from people, but we also want you to hear us when we speak. I think that's fair. I think that's actually called true communication. And I think that's the part of this that we tend to miss out because we do use social media. It becomes a very one-sided conversation. I would like for people to understand that just because I don't agree with you, or just because this process, again, doesn't suit your bill, doesn't mean that the process is wrong. It, and we do know that ADM has a little bit of a bad taste in all of our mouths as far as those type of things. But we're also looking at this thing from all four sides. We've got a House bill that's put in place to make sure that we all maintain transparency and do our due diligence. We have a ADM that has looked at the permitting, EPA that's looked into a part of it, and then there's us. And right sitting in the middle of this is MWT, and they're being analyzed on every angle that we can possibly look at them. And I promise the citizens of Etowah County, I've lived here my whole life except for some time in the military. This is my home. I ran to be the mayor of Rainbow City because I love Rainbow City and I love Etowah County. And I think that all the people that serve around me can say the same thing at my city hall. If not, I think they would already be gone.
Well, and that discussion, and you bring up a good point. And however, that this goes down. And again, I encourage folks, if you've got questions or concerns, that is your right. That's the beauty of living in a democracy. That's why you and I have spent time wearing a uniform. Absolutely. And so it is what it is. Obviously, these guys and gals that are on with us, they're hoping that you're in support of what they want to do. But if you truly don't like what's being brought forth, and what they're trying to do, then you've got an opportunity to speak, and perhaps somebody will go home unhappy with the way things go. And we move on with, you got elections, and, additional elections. And, if you don't ultimately, to be blunt, if you don't like what he's doing, that's the beauty of the democracy. And you can change that out. But this has been a very different experience in this thing than what we dealt with the rendering plant. But that is, again, that's something that I want to encourage you to engage in the conversation. That's part of I have said the rendering plant is a symptom of a systemic problem that we have in this community. And a lot of that also involves us and is on our shoulders, because we didn't pay attention, we didn't engage. And, now we are, perhaps, guys like Bob and Dave that are trying to build a business would probably prefer that we weren't quite staring at them quite so much. But I would, if nothing else, say it's good to see them willing to undergo the scrutiny, and it's encouraging to me, in whatever way you're interacting in this whole thing, that you're interacting. because I think, a year and a half ago in this community, it would have gone down very differently. And it honestly would have been probably a good bit easier and less time consuming for Bob, and Melissa wouldn't be sitting here, ready and primed and ready to answer questions and invest quite so much time into this. But we're thankful that they are. So, Bob, any last? Again, we've got a couple more questions in this, but I just, any other last thoughts that you'd like to?
Well, I'd just like to say, in wrapping it up, we're close to it. I appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate the mayor and his team working with Dave and I and Melissa to get through this. It's been a lengthy process. I am very committed to it. I feel like this is the proper way to go. I wouldn't be here if it was not. I'm hoping that others will see it this way, but I do believe it is a strong move for our community. I think it can be a good boost for us, and we're embracing it with everything we've got to move to the next level of operations if everything goes well. So.
All right. Okay. So let's cover just a couple of these questions, and hopefully they're not meant to be too snarky and can be well handled. One comment from a Facebook user, Pilgrim's Pride, said their plant would be safe for environment. Why should we trust this plant is safe? Why take the risk? So I'm gonna first answer that, and then probably I'm gonna turn it over to the mayor to share his thoughts. We've really kind of already covered, I think, the majority of the answer to that. But the stark contrast in just doing a mild amount of research with Pilgrim's Pride, the instant, as soon as anyone asked questions, the letters NDA came out like wildfire, and that was every answer to every question that seemed to be asked. Everything was done with discussions in the dark of night. They were talking about new technology, and yes, it's a valid conversation for us in this community to have, especially if you've just got the 5 or 10 minutes at a time to listen to really get educated on what's happened. But they were preaching new technology that they had never operated. And when you wanted any details on the technology, again, they throw out all the NDA and say it's all proprietary and all of that kind of stuff. I think that the stark contrast is in just looking at the two businesses and the two companies. As Bob said, they're a startup. They're not a multi-billion-dollar multinational company that has systemic trends of paying millions and billions of dollars in EPA fines, workplace hazard issues. So I think it's a fairly disingenuous thing in comparison, to say that this is the information's been provided to the environmental groups that we have come to trust. They've both said, yeah, and there's no big red flag. They immediately freaked out when they started looking at the permits that were submitted with ADEM and all of that kind of stuff. So, I can't spend the time and invest the time. I'm definitely not investing near the amount of time that Mayor Taylor has in getting smart on what it is that this technology is. But, the best I can do is listen to, Coosa Riverkeeper and GASP and what they're saying. And when they say, yeah, environmentally speaking, there doesn't seem like, and then the size and scope of this operation, and again, go back and listen to that meeting that we had in Rainbow City, kind of explaining, the size and scale. I mean, we're talking 12, 15 people, a much, much smaller operation. We're not talking about 100 trucks loaded with waste. So again, I think it's a little disingenuous with some of that question, but I understand why that question is being asked. yeah, I guess maybe there is a little risk, but there's going to be risk with everything that we bring in. We should, I think, be happy and hope that every business that wants to come set up shop here is going to work with us, discuss things with us, be transparent, and that we can build that as a trend, a way of doing business, and just in the way of doing business become something that attracts good businesses that we want here that pay well and take care of their employees or take care of us as citizens. So, I mean, at the end of the day, if you go and do the research and you listen and talk to what they have talked about, if you still feel like they're lying, I feel like either they're really, really slick sales folks. I'll go go as far to say that some of the folks that were trying to talk from Pilgrim's Pride were slick sales folks. Unfortunately, they weren't very good slick sales folks. Maybe if Bob and Melissa and Dave are as good at selling us a bunch of crap, that maybe Pilgrim should have hired them. But there's just nothing that's really, so it's just such a apples to oranges comparison and all of that. But, hey, at the end of the day, you do your research, look through these guys, find out what you can on the internet. Obviously be careful in all of that, and form your opinion. Why take the risk? Well, I mean, the next business that comes in very well could have nothing to do with waste disposal and rendering, but be far more risky for our environment and our community. So just think about that, as you try to formulate your opinion. So, I don't know that there's much more that I can say to that.
I'd just like to put out there, Michael, if anybody has any questions, from the beginning, we have Josh and I have put out our contact information, and they're welcome to contact myself or Josh, and we'll be glad to respond.
And I've seen some of the emails that have bounced back and forth with some of the citizens. Maybe again, as we addressed earlier, I'm sitting here in Knowles and Sullivan. I've become friends with them. They are, the law firm or one of the law firms involved in this process. So certainly, on the internet, the disingenuous person could say that I'm saying this because I'm skewed in my opinion. But I am trying to do the best I can to objectively look at this as a community, and which is what we're trying to do as Advanced Etowah. To the same thing the mayor was saying, we're not trying to be the gatekeepers of the businesses that come and go. We're trying to just, hey, there's some processes that are broken. There's some governmental structures that are broken that we need to fix if we want to move forward with Etowah. So all that being said, my opinion is Michael Wildman sitting here, and all that I've seen, the discussions, it's a night and day, night and day comparison between the two companies that want to come and do business here. I hope you do your own research. But all I can do is tell you why I feel that way. Ultimately, I'm not a pro MWT or against them. I'm pro that we're having this discussion and that they're engaging in the discussion, that the mayor's engaging in the discussion. And I recognize that some people may be unhappy about it at the end of the day, but the reality is when you got a group of people, not everybody's going to be happy. So I don't know, maybe that's not the answer that everybody wants to hear. But Mayor, is there anything else that you want to add in on that with, the question of why take the risk?
I think we've all been snake bit by Pilgrim's Pride.
Absolutely.
And because of that, we've put ourselves in a position where we believe that everything is bad now. I think when I used to inspect parachutists before they would jump out of an airplane, our standard mantra was to look for what's right and what's wrong will be glaringly apparent. When you make supposition and decide that, well, what if, start looking up under the covers, and if you don't find it, it's not there. That's just the way it is. And we've done our due diligence. That's another overused term that kind of makes me cringe, but we've done our due diligence. We've continued to stall the process at time to make sure that we have everything that we need. And when you've got people that say, okay, yeah, we need to turn that over, we will send that to you. And it's been a continual two-way street, but with no NDA in place, this has all been very above board. As a matter of fact, even early on, I mentioned to Mr. Blum that, do you believe, is there any portion of this that needs to be held in confidence to make sure that we didn't wreck a deal for him and hurt business? And, and he said, no. He said, and I think that's the way we did it, is just to say, hey, let's let it out there. I did know that this was going to be a tough environment. I mentioned that to him. I said, this may or may not work just because the pitchfork and torches are still warm, right?
Oh yeah.
And I think,
and we're not done with that. So
yeah, and I think we're proving that in the comments, and I don't hate them. I don't dislike them. I think that it's this is what we're supposed to have been doing the whole time.
Yeah.
I think we did it after the fact last time. I'm telling you that this thing has been so wide open. Hey, look at it. Because it's not over yet.
And before somebody jumps on and pings us for hating on NDAs, and we've fully acknowledged that there is a time and a place for NDAs in all of this process. That is not at all something that we are unreasonably hating on. And there's a lot of that. If you really want to understand all of that, there's a lot in business that you need to understand. But that NDAs perfectly appropriate, applied in appropriate ways. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The last stuff, just to wrap up the last questions, that is finishing off with the technical side of things. And I'm just going to read these through. I won't bring them up on the screen, but question of, isn't most medical waste a biohazard? And will any of the waste be radioactive? And then a question about, doesn't this kind of process create a bad odor, or bad or worse than the rendering plant would? So I don't know if Melissa's still with us, if she can touch on some of that, and Bob.
Let's start with Melissa, if she's available.
Yes, I'm still here.
We appreciate your patience. So
the question about medical waste is about biohazard is correct. Medical waste is considered a biohazard, but that is different than hazardous waste. So there are two separate categories. So a biohazard, if you take an insulin shot and then you pitch out that shot, that remaining needle, that needle is now classified as a biohazard. Hazardous waste is something altogether different. So that, and then the question about radioactivity kind of rolls into that. So radioactivity obviously would be quite a bit of a hazard. And so the waste, I can speak to my experience as the director of the New Mexico facility, in that we did regular radioactivity testing. We tested every shipment that we received. We also, every shift, multiple times a shift, so therefore multiple times a day, we went and tested the radioactivity at 3 or 4 different locations around the facility. Everything from the office in which I sat to the car park outside. And what I can say is that the radioactivity levels around the facility were always Very, very low. I was actually just looking through the data that I had collected, those records that we kept. And I couldn't even tell you how many were reading at just 0.00. So radioactivity was a major concern that I had, that my husband had when I started to work for MWT originally. And that was a concern that was very quickly dismissed by excuse me, I've lost the word, but by the investigations that we did, walking around the facility in real time with the Geiger counter, seeing what the ambient was, as well as seeing what every shipment was in terms of the radioactivity reading. And in New Mexico, we did have a policy in place, a standard operating procedure that did allow us to decline or refuse acceptance of loads of waste if they were not in the shape that we would expect. So if, for example, they were leaking, if the boxes were damaged, if they were hot, if that is to say hot in a radioactive term. So in my experience, we never had a situation where there was a radioactivity concern in New Mexico. And then I think there was another question about odor, and I'm trying to think about how you describe it. I would say it smells like hot metal, because the unit in which the pyrolysis process takes place is obviously getting up to very high temperatures on the inside. And even though it's insulated, obviously it does get quite warm. And so if you can imagine what hot metal smells like, that's what this unit smells like. Now, I've never been near a rendering plant, so I cannot speak to a comparison. Although I'm going to go out on a limb and say a rendering plant smells quite a bit worse than just hot metal. But that would be a personal opinion. It's not predicated on any empirical fact that I have. So I think I've covered. I think I've covered those questions. If I've missed something, just give me a holler, and I can say more.
Bob, was there anything that you wanted to add in on that?
I think she covered that actually quite well. And thank you, Melissa. Thank you for sharing that.
And also to point out, I think the primary waste y'all are going to be handling is going to be pharmaceutical waste.
It is.
So
that is the largest piece of our business. And a lot of that is going to be dry materials. There may be some liquid dropper materials, like eardrops and
right.
a variety of different types of antibiotics, perhaps. But that's the majority of it. The biomedical phase of that material, it will stay in bags and it will stay in sealed containers until it goes into the chute. So we're going to do our best, and we're going to do everything in our power to minimize that, as we always have in all of our plants, even from the other waste plants that I've been at. I mean, the odors, we have not had those issues, and I don't expect to see them there. We'll be on top of those kind of issues. I can assure you of that.
Okay. Well, I think that that covers everything that I've seen, and hopefully answers what questions folks have for now. I appreciate everybody's time, and yes, this has been a Band-Aid being ripped off, Mayor, and the sounds of it and all that kind of stuff. But I'm encouraged to see the process that has been, that has occurred here, and it has been a stark contrast. Will the process of democracy and politicians and citizens and businesses interacting become the perfect process? No, I think that's silly. If we want to get to perfection and perfect interactions, then we probably need to move the discussion to the church and have it there. But certainly this is much better than what we've experienced the last year. Whether you think this is a good thing for Rainbow City or not, hopefully you can at least acknowledge that. You know, again, take into consideration as we move forward to the question earlier, which I think is one of the big major things, the big major complaints. Why does Etowah County not get the good stuff? You know, why does it, you know, these big major, you know, corporations that are going to pay big dollars and all that kind of stuff? There's a whole year and a half worth of content that I think you could go back and watch, that would start explaining why we struggle and why we've had issues in Etowah County. But you can also go back and look at things that are starting to swing the pendulum, that are starting to make a change. You start listening to some of you know, folks like the mayor, you know, and I'm sure he had some pretty interesting conversations up in D.C. The past few days. You know, I had a chance to sit down with Congressman Adderholt, and I'm going to get that video out here shortly. But you listen to other folks that are involved in economic development and the discussions in our region and our area. You know, this thing that has occurred in our county, it's being noticed. And ultimately the big reason will be that we need better leadership in our community, that makes better choices and better decisions and puts in harder work.
Yeah, let me say one thing to that. While I was up in D.C., I had an opportunity to not only meet the standard one time for a photo at the Capitol steps, but I had dinner with Congressman Adderholt, had lunch with our breakfast with Senator Tuberville and Senator Shelby, and in those conversations, especially with Senator Adderholt, our Congressman Adderholt, you know, the statement was made that we had a citizen correction here, and I think it was his chief of staff that made that statement, and that is that and I think I'm going to brag on the opposition here, which I
We're
really
okay.
try to do. Yeah, the opposition, you know, came in and they set forth a position that created a correction, and that was that they corrected government. They said, you're not doing it right. Go back to doing it the way the book says, and kind of laid the book out for us, I guess, as elected officials, and that hasn't been lost. That was heard, and it was heard all the way to the Hill in Washington D.C. And I think that this group needs to know that yes, there's no doubt that there are bad actors, there are bad players, but we can't kick everybody off the bus because one person pees in their pants. We just can't do that. We can't start allowing our democratic republic to fall apart and it become a reverse dictatorship, in that the citizenry now comes out and says, if we scream loud enough, if we're mean, even when we're wrong, we get to win. This opposition group, Advanced Etowah, was born out of honesty, trustworthiness, and sincere devotion to the place that they live. I want that to continue, and I promise you this: when I'm incapable of that, you can come and remove me, and it won't take an election. Hey, I'll go home. That's how I feel about it, and that's not to speak to this business necessarily. It's just to speak to the right and wrong of politics. Politics should not be a dirty word. Yep. And it's going to take people like my council that is sincere in what they do and what's going on in Southside and Glencoe and Holt's Bluff and all over. I mean, you know, Etowah. These guys are trying to do good work. These ladies are trying to push forward a different type of politics. And at some point, we're going to have to believe that they'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
But and let me kind of add to that in a sense. I think the opposition has done a good job in terms of shining the light on some of the issues. Now, as to the correction is going to happen at the poll boxes or at the upcoming elections. So it's you as the voters. We've tried to do it. We've tried to put the information out there, give you at least the information that you can make informed decisions on. But ultimately, it's going to be the everyday citizens that's going to control the ultimate outcome of this. And the fight's not over. We got still some major elections coming up that can make a huge difference in terms of our local government. especially the city of Gaston. So don't give up. We still need each of the voters to be out there and be active as a part of this process.
Well, and with that, I will close with Bob. Certainly as a citizen here, it's great to see that you're willing to invest money. You mentioned you and David have invested, and that's the way business gets started. You're taking a big risk, and hopefully you guys as business owners, are encouraged to see what is going on. There are those that are saying that us, quote, yelling and screaming are going to drive businesses away, and I just think that's the absolute wrong. That's the opposite to the mayor's discussion about the correction, and I hope that it encourages the stability of the community. And then you're part of the discussion here in Etowah County too. So
well, this is home.
Yeah.
This is home, and we want to see this community grow. That's the bottom line, and that's what it's all about. I think we can all have different ideas. We can all have different feelings about how it looks to bring a new business in, such as this. But at the end of the day, we all want to see the community do as good as it can be, as good as it can be. And the only way to do that is to go ahead and to venture out and to get the infrastructure in place and to just keep building on our strengths.
Yeah. Well, so keep engaging in the conversation, guys. We don't have the master plan in place yet as a county. A lot of this discussion, I think, it kicks off even more into that discussion countywide. Obviously Rainbow City and Southside are already undergoing that process, but I mean, that's the whole point of all of what that is. It will take time. And we can't put every business on hold that wants to come in here now or has been thinking about it. Quite honestly, I'm glad to see a business that's willing to take some risk right now with some of the shenanigans that have occurred. So thank you guys for your time. Next Thursday night, 5:00, Rainbow City Hall. If you want to go, are you going to live stream that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, are you going to live?
Yes. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Because it's your meeting.
That's right. Yeah, our meeting will be.
Okay. All right. Well, because we've got a thing. The Southern Exposure and Coosa River Keepers were co-sponsoring. They're bringing in some videos to the Pittman to talk about some of the water stuff that is going to be a time conflict.
Yeah. Anytime our council comes together in our council chambers, we live stream. Or if as long as the world doesn't blow up.
Well,
or the internet.
I don't know. These days, the world is getting crazy. Right. So, but thank you guys. Thank you, Melissa, for being extremely patient and the valuable insight and expertise that you bring in. I know Dave's been listening in the background and didn't jump in too much. Hopefully, he's doing all right in traffic. But thank you guys so much. I appreciate you being patient with some of the or I guess I should say being understanding of the context with which you're moving into our community and building a business based on the trauma that we have undergone over the last year. Be patient with us. Wish you the best of luck in the process. And we'll do the best we can to try and make sure that folks are educated and get the right answers. And at the end of the day, the citizens need to make an informed decision based on the information they're given, not hearsay, not what their brother said or the quick soundbite. If you're really passionate about this and you're not willing to take the 30 minutes to an hour to listen to these conversations. You know, we're now, you got 2 hours worth of content, 2 hours worth of discussions that I think addresses a lot of this stuff. There's additional research that's out there. You know, if you're not willing to do that, then I don't think you're making an informed decision. And I think you need to consider, you know, how you express your views on all of this. So, but you have your right to your opinion, and you have your right to how you feel about things, and that's okay too. So, guys, have a great night, and lots and lots more politics. Super excited about that in the coming months. But yeah, y'all have a great evening. Thank you so much. We will see all you guys next Thursday. Bye.